I lead product design at Flow. It's an AI startup where we are solving the problem of voice to text. Rather than simply converting your words to text, Flow captures the intent behind what you say and just like writes for you. A big epiphany came in my fourth year of college. This was during COVID. I had just signed up for this behavioral economics course, and people with disabilities like ADHD or aphasia, like they write really thoughtful messages to us about like how flow changed their life. Like it's literally enabled them to do stuff that they would have never been able to do.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Design Hat podcast. I know it's been a while, and today we have a very amazing guest with us, Aditya, who is leading design at Flow. He has a really great amount of experience, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And so let me just get him on stage, and we'll just kickstart the podcast. Hey Aditya, really nice to have you here.
Hey Abhay, yeah, I'm excited to do this.
Awesome. So let's just kickstart it with kind of a brief introduction about yourself.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Aditya Mankare. I lead product design at Flow. It's an AI startup where we are solving the problem of voice to text. So we're building this voice to text tool that goes beyond traditional voice dictation, and rather than simply converting your words to text, Flow captures the intent behind what you say and just like writes for you. We're through that voice experience, we're trying to create a more natural and effortless writing experience. So yeah, that's my job at Flow. Before Flow, I worked at Meta at Reality Labs in specific, where I designed AR and VR creation tools. So when I say creation tools, these are for the creators who are building in the metaverse. And yeah, a lot of my work helped them build more interconnected VR spaces in Meta's metaverse. So yeah, that's my professional background. On the academic side, I have a master's in human computer interaction from the University of Michigan. And before that, I studied math and economics in college.
That sounds really great. And I think we're going to get kind of deeper clarity on the values that you have gained so far with the experiences and the education that you have. So let's start kind of talking about your journey. I know that you have moved through several exciting roles from like AR, VR at Meta, and now like doing like voice detection AI kind of at Flow. So like, how did you kind of navigated these kind of career transitions, and kind of what led you to now kind of focusing on the voice interactions in the consumer space?
So when I started college, I was very much interested in like the tech industry. I knew I wanted to do something there, but yeah, just like being that young and inexperienced, I didn't know where to start. So I started with like the typical CS math that people do, like software engineering, data science, and I started by exploring a few internships in data. So like I was like a biostatistics researcher, I was a business intelligence analyst, and just through these experiences, I mean, I enjoyed the technical problems, but what I enjoyed more was like the why behind them, and like the strategy behind those problems, and the more creative approach towards like building good products than just like solving technical problems. I think a big epiphany came like in my fourth year of college, and this was during COVID. I had just signed up for this behavioral economics course, and I think that course changed my life. um, that course had like some recommended readings. Like so, in the US, like the syllabus usually has like a lot of recommended readings. Not all of them are necessary, but because I had so much time on my hands and I was like just really interested in the field, I just like read all the books in that reading list, like books like Thinking Fast and Slow, Predictably Irrational, Nudge, Hooked, like How to Build Habit Forming Products, and you know that I think that was a turning point. Like that got me really obsessed with understanding human behavior, about like how people make choices, how people make decisions, and how people form their habits. Like I knew I wanted to do something in this space. So I kind of combined my obsession for understanding human behavior with like building products. And the thing is, those internships, I was working on like small like scoped projects, but I never thought about those projects deeply from a human-centered perspective. And the thing is, like understanding more about behavioral science, like kind of helped me think about it from a more empathetic lens. And yeah, that's when I decided that I want to build a good foundation in HCI and build a career in UX. So it was kind of like a serendipitous journey about how I kind of got interested in design. Now talking about, yeah, after I decided to do my master's, it was like I was still like at these crossroads between UX research or UX design. I think a lot of people go through that as well. But the more, I guess, like the more thought I gave to this, I realized that um, I wanted to work on like be more hands on with building stuff. Because before, like in my third year, I did this product management internship where I was a part of some of the product decisions, but I was never truly hands on with prototyping or just like thinking through like the interactions or like the UX of the product. It was more so just like product requirements or just like more strategy decisions, and I kind of felt like a little disconnected from the actual building. Anyway, that kind of enabled me to like choose design over research. And what kind of drew me to Meta or even Whisper, like all these roles, like if you think about it, they're all in the emerging tech space. And there's, I think, all massive, I guess, like jumps in technology. Like say for example, when we went from say walkie talkies to pagers to cell phones to smartphones, they have caused massive shifts in like human behavior and like people's lifestyles. And as I said, like because of my interest in behavioral science, it just kind of felt like really impactful to work on these kind of emerging technologies, because you have the power and the responsibility of like shaping people's like habits, their productivity, their wellness, etc. And yeah, that's something that really excites me, like wakes me up in the morning, gets me going. So yeah, like this was during 2021 2022 when Facebook had just rebranded to Meta. They had all these AR/VR opportunities, and I was like fortunate enough to get one of them. And yeah, I built a good foundation in just like designing for immersive tech, mostly VR, but also like a few AR projects. But during my time there, I realized that just due to Meta's business needs, they were mostly focused on the social use cases of these technologies, like social gaming, social entertainment. I think I personally would have preferred to work on something like education, like in VR. Like I feel like there is like much like more thoughtful, um, use cases there. And also, I think we have enough screens, right? We have our laptops, our phones, our iPads, etc. And I was just thinking about like, is this really the future? And of course, like it's going to be a part of the future, but yeah, like looking into it further, I came across like a lot of companies working in invisible tech, like invisible UI, and voice is like a great example of it. But there's also BCIs and just like so many different things. But that was the main reason why I started looking outside of Meta. This was also during a time when LLMs were taking off and OpenAI had released their Whisper speech to text model, and it was really exciting with the progress that they had made. So yeah, it kind of felt like a new challenge and like something that was more aligned with my interests. That's what brought me to Whisper. By the way, Whisper is the parent company that launched Flow.
That sounds amazing, and I think that is what is really interesting to me, like how kind of you pivoted across. And I think one thing that really kind of stood out is like you found that kind of emerging tech is a space that you want to explore, and as you grew you understood like we have screens, you wanted to kind of explore the invisible tech. And I think that is something a lot of people might not be able to grasp from it, but that is really important, that how you need to understand the deeper tech, I would say. Like people just see the mainstream things like LLM, AI, and other stuff, but you need to understand the bigger vision of the future. Like I don't think, like, it will be very rare for people to see like invisible tech. Like even some years back, you ask people like if AR or something like will be there, or like if you have like haptic touch or other stuff, like that's like people would be like dreaming about it. Would like that's not possible. That's not something they would want to explore. But nowadays there have been opportunities, and some like people should explore that. That should be the aim to kind of people grasp from it. What my assumption is,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah. So going forward, as you said, like your current work at like kind of Whisper, so like involves kind of leading obviously the product and brand design. What would you say like have been one of the biggest challenges or kind of rewards kind of leading the design, and especially like in a space which is as you said, like in invisible tech, like a voice interaction, it's very unique space. So like kind of what are the challenges and rewards that you have kind of got faced?
Hmm. So in my role, I think I'll probably divide this answer into three parts. There's like challenges for and challenges and rewards for designing at startups, designing for voice interactions, and then designing in the consumer space. So I'll tackle them one by one. But yeah, let's start with designing at startups. I think one of the key things here is you're pretty much like a young company trying to break into the market, right? So, and you're also building the company, the product, and entering the market at the same time. So your job is not just designing; it's a lot more. I mean, of course, you have to do user research, a little bit of branding, be involved in marketing. You're doing a lot of things, but along with these technical things, you're also building a design culture. You're gaining respect for the design, like design, I guess, like the value of design in the company, for educating and evangelizing other like leaders and other teammates on design. So it's an intense job which is more, I would say, soft skill heavy than hard skill heavy, but of course you need the hard skills. But it is like, at least for me, I wanted that because I really wanted to see how companies are built from the ground up. Having interned at like different kinds of companies, I had like some context on like how different companies operate, but I'd never like seen how companies are like built, like how are they even born, and how are good companies born and shaped. So yeah, I think the rewards here were like it helped me develop holistically as a person. Like it makes you a better designer, of course, because you get to think 0 to 1. You get to work on different parts of the product. It makes you a better leader, I feel, because you're just like you get so much autonomy and you can show your impact. And like it's pretty obvious to see if you're doing a good job or not because you're usually the only one. Um, and yeah, I think it really increases your business acumen, especially to like find product market fit. And I think that skill like helps in a lot of different areas. Like if you can like do something that hard, you get a respect of a lot of product people. Now moving on to like designing for voice interactions, I think there's like a couple of challenges here. First is it's very hard to learn from users, like in the space of voice interaction, until the users have actually used your product, right? Because you can't just put up a Figma or origami prototype in front of them and like get true accurate insights. And because these tools are limiting, you can't prototype voice on them. So there's a bias towards like building and learning than prototyping and learning. And when I say building, I mean like engineered prototypes that you need to test. And that can be a drag because you like when you're designing, you can build prototypes faster as compared to engineering, right? So I think that's one big challenge. Second is a lot of like design patterns for voice are not I guess they're outdated because voice with LLMs is very different from like voice with ASR. ASR is automatic speech recognition, by the way. This was like before LLMs, right? Like you see Apple's dictation, like the streaming text, like basically that. And LLMs operate differently. There's like they're more powerful, but they have like high latency. There's like some characteristics there, but my point is there's no established design patterns, so you have to like innovate on those, which can take time as compared to like a traditional, say, mobile app. Let's just say a marketplace, like a lot of design patterns for like a marketplace are already established, so it's not as hard to like put something up together over there. And thirdly, it's still an evolving technology, and you have to work around its shortcomings. Like there's going to be a lot of error handling, a lot of edge cases, and yeah, that can get annoying sometimes. But no, I think it's very rewarding, especially if you can hack it. The experience feels like truly like magic and can be a game changer, especially for people with certain kinds of disabilities. Yeah, like think about it. You essentially get to rebrand something that sucked, and say that you were part of the team that did it. So I think that's really rewarding. It definitely keeps me motivated for the work that I do. And as for like designing for consumers, as the last thing, the thing with like B2C is there's a really high bar for adoption. Like consumers are like short attention spans. Uninstall your app if it doesn't give immediate value. It's hard to get people to even pay for stuff. I mean, even adopting a free product is hard. Paid is like even harder. Uh, but I think like what I've learned is it comes down to this: like you have to give people something that they didn't know that they needed. And this is like a tough concept to kind of get around because a lot of, I guess, like in hindsight it seems like, yeah, like this user insight maps to like this feature or like this product, but like when you're building it, it's much harder because you have to go really deep into like analyzing your user research, observing people, and the key is to uncover these hidden insights. Now, to give an example, like with Flow, like during some initial customer discovery calls, like the problem space is like quite broad. Like you don't know what exactly you're building and for whom and why, and if you like tackle all these questions at the same time. Now, yeah, so I was talking about the example for Flow. Now, people like talked about certain pain points like not being able to type comfortably on a flight, or they talked about how many customer support tickets they have to respond to, or they talked about how much like let's say like mundane communications they have to do as a VC, just introducing people or just like following up, etc. And this didn't mean that they wanted or they requested a voice dictation tool, but the pain points were pretty evident for like certain niche audiences. And yeah, like it just the thing is like when you absorb so much data, you like just like through talking to people, you kind of realize that there's actually so many knowledge workers who are using like who are doing a lot of async communication, especially in like this remote work age that we're living. And from the technology side, back then we were actually working on voice commands, like just like kind of Siri, right? But I remember like what this was as like when I joined the company, LLMs would pretty much like even if I had filler words or if I spoke the voice command a little incorrectly or a little slowly, it would clean up and give me like a really polished like voice command text. And that's when I thought like people like are writing and just putting up with the keyboard and like writing because that's the only option available. And if LLMs can clean up their voice to like a decent degree, I think there's potential for like a voice dictation product here. Like there's definitely like an unmet need, and a lot of like big tech companies are not working on this. So anyway, that was like an opportunity we identified, and like we kind of gave people something that they didn't know they needed. And yeah, I mean we're still growing, we're still pretty young, but yeah, like specific industries like product management, venture capital, customer support, and like a few others. Like they have really loved Flow, and yeah, I feel like just like when you build in the consumer space, it's cool because you get to give the product to your friends to try out, and like they know what you're working on, as compared to like a internal tool or like a B2B tool. Um, and oh, also, I think this is probably the most rewarding part, by the way. People with like disabilities like ADHD or aphasia, like they write really thoughtful messages to us about like how Flow changed their life. Like it's literally enabled them to do stuff that they would have never been able to do. And yeah, I think that is the most fulfilling part of the job.
Totally makes sense. I think read one of the posts by Tane about one of the person kind of talking how they really like the product and how it has kind of shaped their experience. I think I agree. I totally agree, especially with the consumer facing product. Like getting a good emotional feedback is kind of really, really rewarding, which is I would say understatement right now. But like people who are working on this, who have put sweat and tears, like they know how much that means to them. Similarly, I think you talked about a bunch of stuff here with the being startup from 0 to 1. I think that is one of the kind of exciting or maybe thrilling experiences people kind of go for when joining a startup. And especially for me, like I have always worked in startup space, making from 0 to 1 products, and kind of trying to even find PMF and other stuff. So the what I've experienced it, like it is uncertain and adventurous. I think at big tech it gets monotonous, redundant at, I would say, from the very start. And my assumption is that I've never worked in a big tech, so my assumption is that it's very difficult unless you are in a wave like how AI came and everybody kind of jumped on kind of delivering things which they were supposed to deliver maybe in like 10, 15 years, but now they have to get it done maybe in a span of 6 months to a year. So I think this is always an exciting part for people to kind of look for in a startup. And as I said, I really liked what you put out there, especially with emerging tech. Even I think with AR, VR, it's a similar problem about prototyping and kind of making people, because I think very in general sense, people, if you ask people why would a company need a designer, sure, other insights might come, but one of the insights would be they want to test with users faster. They want to get their insights right. But with, again, emerging tech, it's not, I would say, easy. Again, it can be opportunity for other companies out there to kind of build a product which makes it easier. And I think I recently was exploring one of the new products called Play, which works on the Swift UI stuff, and which that is quite interesting. I want to explore the opportunities in the prototyping space as a designer, especially if you have a background in tech. Like it gets much easier. But I have pretty crazy insights. I think you have given. I think really something to think about. So yeah, just talking about the other stuff. So as we know, like you have worked in very diverse sectors. I know. I think you have all, even though you have other job titles, but you have also worked in the healthcare sector, AR, VR, and now like AI, especially with the voice stuff. How do you kind of adapt to your, I would say, design thinking like across these various industries? Is there anything that have always been a common thing that have like a common principle that you have always kind of relied on?
Yeah, you're right. I've worked across like a lot of different industries. I think, yeah, if I look back, it's been academia, manufacturing, healthcare, and then tech. But there's like, yeah, a lot of like similar themes across all of them. So I think when you're designing, I really believe this, like the fundamentals are the same. Like everything is very grounded in psychology and like user testing. Like, you know, as simple as it sounds, of course, it's like just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy, but it's like those fundamentals that matter. And of course you need to be, it is important to be truly adaptable, right? And the way at least I have approached this is whenever you join like a new environment, it's essential to understand the context of the product you're working on, the industry, the business model, the user impact, the business impact, business priorities. Like there's like so many things to tackle. Like I remember one of my mentors told me this, that whenever you join a company as a designer, your job is to be like become the subject matter expert of that, like that field or that topic as soon as possible. Like the sooner you do that, the better intuition you're going to have. And like and the way you do that is just by reading up all the documentation, reading up or doing some secondary research by yourself. I think now with AI, it's like a lot easier to do. I remember doing this like before we had ChatGPT, and just like I remember being in page 5 of Google, just like reading every link and having all these 10 tabs open. But yeah, that's one part of it. You want to also talk to key people. So I remember like when I was at Canon, so at Canon, like the camera company, I was working in the manufacturing sector, like their manufacturing division, and was building sales dashboards. But okay, so sales dashboards for their printers and like other like non-camera electronics, just to get more context about like how sales works and like the different product lines. I literally went to the factory floor, talked to the factory workers about like what different printer lines exist and like how they're made. I feel like just like being curious about that space will just kind of give you knowledge you didn't know you needed. It'll just help you vibe with your team better. There's just like a lot of benefits to that, and in general it's just going to make you like increase your general knowledge if anything. So it's always a good thing to do. um, but let me also touch on the business like needs and priorities, like because like I feel like a lot of yeah, a lot of okay, so how important design is to a product depends on that. So to give an example, right, at Merck, I was working on a team that was building a chatbot. It was like an internal tool to find subject matter experts within the company, within our department, and the main goal was to have accurate results. The UX of that chatbot wasn't that high a priority. Like for example, like it didn't matter if it was like a 3-click process or a 4-click process. Like the employees were going to use it because it was an internal tool and it was going to be forced upon them. What was more important was to get the data right, and like we needed more investment there. Like there was no benefit in like over optimizing the UX as much. But like when you think about flow, it's like a SaaS product, consumer SaaS product. Adoption is a big thing. You need to be heavily selling the product, making a good promise, and then delivering on that promise with good UX, and also get people to pay for it. Like otherwise, people are just going to abandon it. It can't be forced on users like an internal tool. So it just very important to understand the context you're operating in, and I think that's how you can add most value to the business.
That is quite interesting. I think some of these things are again not something people kind of think of at a first glance, but they are really, as you said, like some of these principles are really common across industries. Uh, but again, the principles kind of lies behind the same things, like how user behave, what's the psychology. Again, industry changes, and I think how the company would want to also perceive will change. Some companies just focus on growth, some companies just focus on something else. Like, it depends on the company as well. But I think the major principle as a designer don't change as much. Depends again. Obviously, unless you're working in a very new industry, you are just evolving. Even then, I feel the basic principle doesn't change. Maybe you may wanna explore other opportunities to kind of figure out the user behavior. Which again, new technology brings new insights which may not be available outside. As you said, like again, being in voice, again, my limited knowledge says like there aren't like a lot of user behavior psychology you can find unless you talk to a lot of folks. And again, without prototype, like easy prototyping, it gets again difficult but similar. Like similarly, you have to figure that piece out. So that's quite interesting. uh, Now, going forward a little outside your professional journey, I think what you told me, like you have kind of like gave a lot of mentorship to a lot of folks. What you would say, I think a lot of times mentors give mentorship as part of helping the budding designers. I think one of the insights I would also want to know, like, what have you gained from your experiences with mentorship, and like what has been your guiding kind of advice for the aspiring designers who are kind of trying to figure out their way with this fast evolving industries with like AI, voice, AR, VR, and other emerging tech coming out?
But yeah, I'll break this out into two parts. One is like navigating, like getting good mentorship, and then even like how I try to help my mentees. I'm pretty early in my career, so it's probably going to be more of the former. I think when you're like seeking mentorship, one of the big things is like I think this is what I see in a lot of, I guess, like students. They're a little shy or like a little afraid of just like putting themselves out there. It's like, don't do that. Just like put yourself out there, send cold messages. Like, don't be afraid of rejections. They're never personal. It's just that some people are busy, some people have the time. Like some people will definitely reply because people do want to give back. And once you have like some network, right? Ask that network who they think you should talk to, and like it just becomes this chain reaction of like them introducing you to people, and every time you meet somebody, you just have like somebody else lined up, and you just kind of want to cover more surface area and just kind of get more data points about like what their professional journey was like, what their work is like, what their design philosophy is like, etc. You get a good view of the industry that way. But yeah, I've noticed warm intros like almost always lead to better connections because you're kind of like pre-filtered. There's like some social proofing, and usually the person who connects you knows that okay, you guys have this one common interest. Like, oh, if you guys like design systems, you guys are gonna have fun talking to each other, for example. Another thing I would say here is there's like an art to just like asking good questions to your mentors. Like, you definitely want to like like rely on more tactical and strategic advice as compared to just like having them solve a problem for you. Like sometimes like that happens with me and I'm just like, wait, this is something you have to do yourself. You're gonna ask your mentors to do that. But anyway, that's like probably for people who are just starting out. Another thing on this topic is it's okay to outgrow mentors because there's going to be a time when like you probably just take a different path. Like for example, like big tech versus startups is like one example, right? So you kind of outgrow some mentors that way because you've like taken a different path or in a different niche, or like it just um, not exactly like a like a mentor mentee relationship. And I think by the way that's the goal, honestly, because at that point you just become friends and you learn as peers, and just like you can also talk about stuff outside of work. It doesn't always have to be work stuff, right? So I think that's like an important thing to note, because like in different phases of your career you'll have different mentors. It never is usually like the same ones. Yeah. But on the topic of like mentoring people, I don't have as much experience. I think all the mentoring that I do is just like helping people to get a good internship or like land a full-time job. Uh, and yeah, my goal is just to like help people avoid the pain of the mistakes that I've made. Yeah, that's probably like all I do.
I think that is people like you may think like you're doing less, but I would say for them it is everything. Because when especially people who are with the industry and with the market right now, even a single piece of honest advice takes people places which are really far. So I think mentors generally really underestimate the value they hold and the kind of impact they create. Sometimes they get to know about it, sometimes they don't. Like I still remember my ex-manager kind of talking to me and telling me one of their folks they mentored went to kind of UK to did their masters in typography, and he was very specific with it. And eventually he joined Meta. He worked there for 2 years. He came back to India for a while to work at a startup, and now he's like a heading product and design at like a very big startup in India. So the point is, like the person obviously they are in touch, but even if they weren't in touch, and even if my manager saw it, like he saw the potential, his advices, his mentorship kind of made, which again is very undervalued. It's not undervalued, I would say. It's very like as a mentor, you feel you you are not, or maybe you are doing just something that like you should do, but that again, that is a lot for the other person who is taking it. So I think I think this is really interesting, and I think a lot of times these things kind of play a very big part in any designer's journey to grow. Again, as you are helping to find internship jobs, some people are helping them figure out their path in the space, maybe niching down, maybe just starting it out, and other stuff. So I think mentorship in general is playing and has played a lot of is really big role in the design space, I would say.
That makes
Go
sense.
ahead.
Like, yeah, I mean, looking back, you're right. I mean, all the people that helped me out probably don't think it's a big deal, but it was a big deal for me. So I agree with that.
True, and I think that has been a big part, at least for my growth as well. I've met bunch of folks, and a lot of times, to be honest, as a mentee as well, a lot of times, at least for me, I would say, I feel it is important to care about, especially the people who are honest with you in terms of mentor. A lot of times, we just go on a hunt to kind of network in the name of mentorship, which again I personally feel is not bad, but whatever the person says, you may seem it is not as useful, but it is.
Mm,
I would say that a lot of time we just undervalue what they are saying, thinking that our purpose was networking, but a lot of time they say things which would like change the perspective of different things in your life. Maybe I would say
yeah.
that. So going forward, I think the next thing I want to talk about is on the data-driven side. I know that in your portfolio you have written like behavior scientists and other stuff, but we want to talk about like with these roles and with this stuff, uh, like what kind of perspective you have on data-driven design? How do you kind of incorporate these data insights into the problem solving that you do in product design?
Yeah, I think okay. So here's my take on this. Like when I think data, like when you say data, right? People always think numbers, but it's like much beyond that. I mean, anything like anything that you're absorbing becomes data. But let me talk about it this way. Like my take on this is data, and mostly quantitative data, doesn't always reveal the entire picture. Even qualitative data like needs to be like really, I would say, scrutinized before you take it at face value. And it's important to like like find a balance between like using data and like using intuition, like in design problem solving. So here's a good thing about data. Like data is like essential for understanding, say, like definite user behavior. This could be observation, user tests, etc. It's important for market trends, and just like there's like I'm not like discounting it by any means, but I'm against relying on it alone. So the main reason is like data can tell you what's happening now, but it can't really predict where you should go in the future. Like it takes some intuition to like use that data to go somewhere, right? And that's where intuition comes in. So I think intuition mainly comes from experience and like having a deep understanding of your product, your industry, your users. And you usually do that just by absorbing, like, absorbing successful and unsuccessful design patterns, other products and how they do in the market, secondary research about people's behaviors, etc. But if I have to like really define it, I think intuition is about envisioning what people might want next, even if they don't realize it. Kind of like what I told you about, giving people something that they didn't think they needed, similar to that. Or I would say the same as that. So yeah, while data helps validate ideas and make better decisions, I think intuition is what truly drives innovation, by just like envisioning new possibilities that data alone would not reveal. That said, there are like domains of design that are definitely like data heavy, like like domains like growth design is like so scientific. Like for example, your crafting and onboarding flow, and specifically measuring adoption data for the onboarding flow, and metrics like the drop off rates by page are gonna tell you, like, are gonna be crucial to determine at what part of the onboarding, you need to like fix the design. So you kind of need quantitative data in some aspects, but I think for true innovation you definitely need a little bit of intuition. Yeah. So especially like because I work in the space of emerging tech, uh, it's definitely like a good amount of it is intuition.
No, totally makes sense. I think, as you put, like it is really apt to say, because I personally have been in a firm which was really growth heavy, because they were marketing first at always, because our CEO and founder was a marketing person. So I think this definitely plays a role. But a lot of times I would say, even in growth, they put like a blind eye on the user perspective at certain point. And they may, like, sure, I am 100% sure if they put like a pattern out, or like a UX pattern or like a UX design out, it will definitely generate the revenue for a short run, but in a long run it will bring really big backlash, not maybe just maybe to the company, maybe to the product, maybe to the feature, or maybe to the overall experience that the user is having. A lot of times there are patterns like forced onboarding, like even it may sound really vague, but even simple things like adding a skip button, people don't do it because they want that data to be used XYZ places. So point being here, like, it's as a designer, one thing that you just said, intuition is really important. And another thing I would say, maybe on a side note, but is also is how you advocate for these decisions, and these intuitions is also important, because you can be like, I feel it's not gonna work, but your feel is not gonna be like answering to the, like, the business or the stakeholder or the C-suite. They're gonna be like, okay, you feel it, sure, I feel this, and let's go with this. So that's not gonna happen. So I think, how do you advocate for that intuition? Sometimes it can be with data, sometimes it cannot be with data, sometimes be it with, I don't know, a user research, sometimes be it with something you have seen in your ears at some certain places, something that you have seen with patterns across various products and features. So again, different logic, but I think that is something really interesting take as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think advocating. By the way, I have a few thoughts here on kind of like building a good argument for intuition. I mean, of course it can't just be like because I feel something. Always needs to be some design rationale to whatever decision you take, but there's like specific tactics that you can use like with people. Like I guess like one common one that I like is like just like what happens next, like what's the second order effect of this, kind of like how you mentioned there could be a PR backlash, right? And that can cost a company a whole lot. Like when you talk to founders about this, for example, you want to like frame this as a media risk, and that that gets them like alert about the like, or I guess like the gravity, like helps them understand the gravity of the situation. Or let's just say you want to like really have a like redesign a good touching brand, but maybe leadership is not willing to invest in more, I guess, like heavy visual design. You want to kind of speak in terms of, okay, you know what, like we want our experience to feel like, say, linear's onboarding experience, like for example, like because like they have like great design, and when people hear that, they're like, yeah, I want my product. If founders hear that, like, I want my product to like feel like that, sure, let's invest in this. So usually it's like always grounded in some like good rationale. But yeah, there's like an art to kind of persuading people that way.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I think as a designer, it's a very great skill, and I think I would kind of put it in the top skills that you should have, and how you kind of advocate for a design, persuade your design around that. I think that is really interesting. So I think I have a very quick last question, and then we'll go to some of the fun rounds of the podcast. So I would say, as someone who has kind of worked in like fast-paced environments like startups and even in like large techs like Meta. I think you kind of answered this in some of your other answers, but like how do you kind of approach innovation? Like kind of how do you kind of balance with the latest design trends that are going out and what kind of your the unique needs of your product is which you are building?
So I think the fundamental difference between big tech and startups is this. Startups are focused on more 0 to 1 net new products. It's like a broad space. They're breaking into the market as compared to big tech that is expanding an existing market. Or like to speak in product metrics, startups are finding product market fit. Big tech is usually enhancing customer lifetime value. So to give an example, the way big tech does this is say Google launched search. They found product market fit with search. Now they want to extend the customer lifetime value by allowing people to search images. So they have Google Images. Then it's like Google Maps, then YouTube. It's just like they're organizing all the world's information. And a lot of the innovation in those settings is how do you take your existing unfair advantage and then expand your offering to just like retain existing users and like bring in new users. With startups, you're like, as I said, breaking into a market. So it's really like you get to like you're focusing on problems that big tech has ignored, and your unfair advantage is that you're small, you can shift fast, you can learn fast, and like pretty much capitalize on a market opportunity that people are ignoring because they're too busy in expanding their core offerings. So I think the approach to innovation like differs that way. Now that doesn't mean the approach to design is like that different. I think this goes back to the point I made about understanding business context. You usually, the thing is, all businesses at the end of the day, you want to make money, and uh, these both kinds of companies, startups and big techs, you just like make money in different ways, and you just have to design around that.
I think totally makes sense. I think a law. Well, I think nowadays it's quite clear, but I would say from a layman's perspective, you would see both of these as companies, but there is a lot beneath it. Uh, I personally feel startups uh, has a lot to do. Like they do a lot more as
Yeah.
compared to big tech. And I would say they experiment a lot as well. Obviously, because they are finding their PMF, while as compared to big tech. But I know for a fact some big techs even have those experimental departments. Even I know in Canada there's a big bank called TD, and they have a TD Invent, which is like their experimental lab where you kind of experiment some of the features, products which they want to experiment with, and that is something interesting. But I still feel their experiment labs or even like their incubators, if they have any, uh, they are gonna be fast, but not still not as fast as the startup, because startups they rely on a very basic psychology of bleeding. Like they bleed money. Like they wanna be, a lot of times there's a big reason. I remember, I think it is from the WeWork biography, where Adam was talking about the growth is when you want to see the growth, you will bleed money. And as a startup, generally startups kind of bleed money to see that higher potential of growth, and then they kind of find that revenue split. And I think similar, there was another concept in Silicon Valley that when I think the CEO was talking about we wanna the plan, and he was talking about the revenue, and one of the investors was like, you don't want to generate revenue, because if you start generating revenue, the revenue won't be enough, will never be enough. And so you don't want to talk about revenue, you just want to talk about the value that you're bringing to the customers. Sometimes that works. I don't know, it depends on what you're playing the game with. And I personally have always inclined towards the startup side of things, because there's more experimentation, there's more ownership, I would say. In big tech, if you have an idea, it has to go through tens and thousands of layers to get to the people who can make those decisions. Until that receives, there's a big discrepancy on what you said and what they hear. So that's another thing. But I think these were some of the perspectives that I had as well around this. So
Yeah, yeah. By the way, on the note of keeping up with latest design trends, right? I think that was like the second part of the question, which I didn't quite get to. But like, I think the best way, this is like something that I've learned after reading a lot of articles or like meeting people in the industry, is to just be curious and observe and critique products. Like And I think a lot of designers already do this whenever they're using an app. They're always like constantly critiquing the UX, which is, I guess, like a double-edged sword. It makes you kind of like annoyed with every app in some ways because you always find faults, but it's also like always like teaching you something. It's really helpful to just like kind of sometimes just set aside time, break down design decisions of a product, their trade-offs, their incentives. Yeah, and by the way, I actually so I've been doing this for a while, but I recently started posting these design teardowns on my Substack at intelligentinterfaces.substack.com. Like shameless plug here, but yeah, I feel like practice by doing is like a great way to just kind of keep up with the industry. It's just like just act of like using something, observing and critiquing it is probably going to help you learn way more than just reading or just like consuming information.
No, I think I totally agree. And I think I was figuring this out recently as well, like how, especially with people, like I took kind of a break from the industry to kind of pursue my master's. And I think I felt in a lot of way like the imposter syndrome of like, am I now enough, right? Even though my master's was not exactly UX, but was around design thinking. And I was like, is this enough or not? So to kind of stay relevant with the industry and keep up with what your like design thinking or like product thinking is, I think I really adopted the way of like tearing down products of what they are, technically practicing UX critique sections in a way, and now I'm kind of starting to do whiteboarding sessions, which I feel a lot of times, especially in the startup world, are not generally the norm of hiring. In big tech, it has to happen, like generally that's how the way is. And I think this is really undervalued in a way, because I think one thing it is really good is because you work on your bigger product thinking rather than intuition, especially when you're working with hypothetical problems. And second thing, there again, I know it's a big leap of faith, but there is a way to kind of talk to a person who have built it. So maybe you can validate that in a some way or form later on, or maybe if you can connect, again, big leap, but something that can happen as well. So I think these things kind of connect you to let you stay connected to the UX and product thinking space, and while letting you kind of explore other avenues as well. So pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so talking about the really fun round. So we have a really fun round here. I'm just gonna share some rough kind of questions. It's a rapid fire round. So some of these are like the choice questions. So you just choose one. You can explain if you want to why you chose one, or else there are some questions where just you have to give one answer, which you can give.
Cool.
Ready? We'll start.
Okay.
So, as you have worked in both the spaces, so would you choose voice interaction or AR VR?
Voice.
Okay. Would you choose Figma or Sketch?
Oh, Figma.
I think that's
I'll
a
be honest, bro. I think pencil and paper is the best.
true. And so, would you say you are a morning person or a night owl?
I can be both, but let's go with morning.
Interesting. Which one book would you recommend to every designer that they should read?
There's this book called Build by Tony Fadell, which is a great read. Like he was a designer on the iPhone, the iPod, and the founder of Next, and he just covers everything from the business aspect of design to the technical aspect of design to just like designing great experiences and great products. That's definitely like number one. I would
Amazing.
also Hooked by Near Eyal is a great one. Like second, yeah, second place.
Amazing. What would you say is the biggest UX trend to watch in 2025?
I personally think the biggest UX trend probably hasn't been discovered, like of 2025 hasn't been discovered yet. It will be soon. It's definitely going to be in the AI space. My assumption is something in the AI agent space. Uh,
Hmm.
there's been some cool interactions, but yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
Interesting.
yeah,
So now, if you could redesign any app or product, which one would it be?
redesign. Let's see. I would say Goodreads. It just always had a hype, like promised a lot, but it just it never gets updated. So yeah, that one.
True. Last one. So, one thing that you always keep on your desk while working, except
Uh,
your laptop.
a bottle of water.
You want to stay hydrated. Makes sense.
or a mug like I have right now.
Okay, so last one. So you have gone through an amazing journey so far, and I think your journey has been a really interesting, insightful one. What would you say has been one defining moment which has made you learn a lot, and which could be, in a way, advice for budding designers who are seeing this?
So I think, yeah, a pivotal moment was when I worked on this project called Hype. It was like a side project. It was a podcast clip curation app that I designed, and I'll tell you why it was like such a defining moment, or why it was so important for me. I feel like, and I think this is something all designers go through in their journey. Like when you start, you have this idea of perfection. Like you are ambitious. You know that okay, this is good design, but you lack the skills to execute on it. Like you try and you're not really proud of your work. Like it takes a while till you kind of get to like being proud of your work. You have like this imposter syndrome. There's like a lot of, it's like it's an emotional roller coaster at times. And I think when you're in that phase, like you really have to push through it, just like iterate, learn, and just like really hustle hard to kind of like get through that phase. But there will come a moment when things start falling into place. Like the features or the UI you design will actually be useful. It'll have a high level of usability. It'll look aesthetic. It'll probably like cover most edge cases, use cases. And I know it's a grind, and you have to like work really hard to kind of like get to a level where you actually get it. And for me, that was like the project that I talked about, which was Hype. And it might seem like, the thing is like that's like probably like the first side project I have on my portfolio. It might just seem like that was my first project, but that was not the case. I probably had like 3 or 4 failed UX projects before I got there. Some of these were like volunteering at a nonprofit. Some of these were just like my own side projects, and I made all kinds of mistakes, like building a product that's just like a feature factory, or building a product that just like, or designing a product that's just like 1% better than the alternative. Like nobody's gonna want to use something like that. Or even like when I was designing a nonprofit, I just didn't take into account the context of like how nonprofits operate, or like what they optimize for. But I feel like when I worked on this specific project, and like actually was like for the first time proud of my work, I think it builds this confidence in doing stuff, and I feel like that, like getting that creative confidence is really magical. And like don't give up, like keep putting in the work until you get there, and I think that's when you truly start enjoying design.
Pretty great insight. I think that is something a lot of folks are going to take from this as well. I think really actionable in a way. And I think this is something people feel, but a lot of people just don't kind of talk about it, or see it as a see it as an opportunity to kind of explore kind of other explore a way to kind of work on it. And some people just like, that's how it is. And I think a lot of time talking to other designers who are in the same boat, or a lot of times, as how you took it, is pretty creative as well.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Aditya, for coming in. I think we are at the end of the podcast. Really nice to have you. I will link down your social and the Substack that you mentioned as well, so people kind of check that out. And I think it is really lovely to have you. I think you are the first person who works at an AI place, I would say, if I remember right. Now people are who have been on the podcast. Now they are in the AI space. I know I one person who is now working at the Microsoft Copilot, who was at the podcast as well. But I think it is really great to learn from people who are working in emerging tech, and that's, I think, where the world is going right now. And I think that is something people should kind of adapt to, learn from. And yeah, that was the aim of the podcast. Really nice to have you. I think people got really amazing insights from your journey.
No, thank you. Like it was a pleasure, and yeah, thanks for giving me a platform to share my thoughts.
Awesome. Awesome. Really nice to have you. And anybody who wants to connect with Aditya, they can ping him on LinkedIn. I will link his LinkedIn below. Awesome.